factory, they had a very small turbocharger, no intercooler, so when the turbo gets hot... Hey, this is Mad Matt from Budget Boosting. Today we're going to talk about engine basics. What's under the hood? A lot of people look under the hood of their car, and they go, what is this? What's under my hood? Well, I'm going to talk about that today. Basics of that. I'm going to show carbureted examples, old car examples, like the 72 Datsun Nissan 240Z, all the way to some fuel-injected cars of today. We've got this 1972 Nissan Datsun 240Z. Practically all original. And she runs. Well, I'm going to talk about what's under this hood, because this was made in 72. So back then, carburetors were made in 72. Engines had carburetors. In this case, these were dual Hitachi SU side draft carburetors. Here's one carburetor, here's the other. Side draft meaning they're sideways, leading to your engine. Whereas other carburetors are on top of your engine, on top of your intake manifold. These are bolted on sideways, so they call them side draft, because the intake comes on from the side and goes straight into the engine. Side draft. So these are your carburetors. It's got dual throttles controlled by one throttle. So you push this one throttle, actuated by your gas pedal, both throttles move. See? Both throttles move by pushing one throttle. Whoom! Just like that. All right. Got your air cleaner assembly. You take these wing nuts off and you can change your air cleaner. Air cleaner assembly, which is shared with two carburetors. This assembly here is your intake manifold, where your carburetors are mounted to, the intake manifold. And part of the vacuum for your intake manifold is your brake vacuum right here. Without this, you push your brakes, they're very hard to push, where this makes it, you barely push your brake pedal and you come to a stop quickly, because they're vacuum assisted by engine manifold vacuum. This makes your braking easy. Which leads to your brake booster right here. This is your brake booster, which assists and makes your braking easy. This is your brake master cylinder, which we got into detail on one of our previous videos. How to change your brake master cylinder, if you'd like to watch that and get up to speed. Your hood retaining latch. Hood latch. Latches here and also releases here. This is your valve cover, or in this case, overhead cam cover. Your camshaft is under this. This is where you put your oil. You pour your oil in here, which feeds oil to your engine. Ignition wires. And behind the ignition wires are the spark plugs. In this case, this is a mechanical fuel filter. Uses the camshaft, a little lobe on the end of the camshaft timing sprocket, to pump and actuate your mechanical fuel pump. This is your battery. Battery. Positive goes to the starter, negative goes to the frame. Radiator. This is where your engine coolant goes, to keep your engine cool. Coolant, antifreeze, coolant or antifreeze, whatever you want to call it. This is what keeps your engine cool and actually gives hot water to go to your heater core to keep you warm in the wintertime. This is your engine-driven radiator cooling fan. This draws air when you're not moving. When you are moving, the air from you moving keeps your radiator cool. But when you're sitting in traffic, this fan draws air, cool air through to keep your radiator and your engine cool. At least to operating temperature, which is regulated by your thermostat, which is under this cover right here. Your thermostat is located here. Once your engine reaches operating temperature, what the regulated thermostat temperature is, it little element in the thermostat expands, opens the valve, and lets the water into the radiator to cool from the engine, and the cool water into the engine to cool your engine. This is your ignition coil. This gives power to spark your distributor coil. Coil wire gives the power to the distributor. As the distributor spins, it gives energy to spark each spark plug by way of the spark plug wires in firing order of the distributor. So at 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4, every inline 6 is firing order. Okay, we're on this side of the engine here, on the straight 6. This area down here is considered your engine block. That's a freeze plug down here. Freeze plug. Engine freeze plug. There's water jackets in your block, and the freeze plugs protect it from coming out. This is your head above your block. Iron block, aluminum head. The head has your valves and your combustion chambers and your spark plugs and your camshaft in there. This is an oil pressure sender. This tells your gauge in your car what your oil pressure is, because this is an oil port directly to the block. Directly receives oil pressure. This is your oil filter. Cleans your oil. As your engine oil circulates around your engine, it runs through this oil filter to clean. Recycles through the engine, gets clean, recycles again. This is your oil dipstick. This tells you how much oil you have inside your engine. And you want to have your oil within this cross-hatched area. Here's really low, here's really high, but the cross-hatched area is just right. So as long as you're within the cross-hatches, you're good. That's where you want to be. Heater core hoses. This is where your hot radiator coolant, it's hot because the engine makes it hot. It goes in and out of your heater core, and your heater blower motor blows hot air on you in the wintertime to keep you warm. This is the source of your heat for your engine in the wintertime when you get cold. This is your strut tower. Strut tower. These bolts hold your strut assembly to your unibody frame. This is the starter motor. This is the starter solenoid, directly connected to the positive terminal of your battery. This gives power to your starter solenoid, which gives power to your starter when you hit the ignition switch, which this wire here is your ignition trigger. You turn your ignition switch, it powers your starter, spins the motor, spins the flywheel on your engine to crank the engine, fuel and spark are introduced, and your engine goes whoom and fires up. This is your alternator accessory. This is the alternator. When your engine runs, this provides power to all your electronics on your engine, and your distributor, your coil, all your gauges in your car. Anything electric is powered by your alternator, and what's left over recharges your battery and keeps it fully charged at 12.5 volts or higher. Usually it charges somewhere around 13.8 to 14. That's kind of normal because it gives you plenty of power to run all your accessories, and residual, the rest will keep your battery charged. And that's pretty much your basics on a carbureted car. Now there's a few more things I can talk about. I talked about the brake master cylinder, and we had another video of the clutch master cylinder, which is located right here. We showed you in one of our videos how to change this out, but that's where it is in this car. Very similar to the 260Z you saw before. Pretty much identical. Now we're going to move on to another carbureted car, except this is a blow-through turbo setup carburetor. It has a top-mounted carburetor. We're going to move on to that. Alright, now we are at a 1979 Nissan Datsun 280ZX. As like the 240Z, a very similar engine. to the 240Z. Except this is an L28, it's a larger engine, and I don't have to go over all the accessories I covered before on the 240Z because the valve cover, the distributor, the coil, they're all in the same location. The master cylinder for the brakes, the master cylinder for the clutch, the intake manifold, the exhaust manifold are in the same place, the dipstick's in the same place, the oil filter, the alternator. So many things are the same. So I'm going to cover what is a little different. This is a turbocharged car. It's not factory turbo. I made this a turbo car. This is your carb hat, which provides your turbo boost from the intercooler to the beginning of your carburetor. This is a 4-barrel downdraft carburetor. Very powerful one. Very good. Quick fuel technology. Blow-through carburetor. Okay. This is a fuel pressure regulator. What this does is allows me to raise my turbo boost. As my turbo boost increases, it raises the fuel pressure by way of this vacuum and boost sensing sensor. It senses boost increase and cuts fuel flow to the return line and increases fuel flow to the carburetor. Of course, we got our radiator and our fan just like the 240Z, the distributor, intercooler for turbocharged car, coolant reservoir. Whatever's not used immediately for the radiator is available right here at the reservoir. Accessories on your engine. This one I just drive the water pump, which is right here, water pump, and also drives the fan, and also drives my alternator. I don't have any more accessories on this car because that's just the bare necessities that I need to go fast. Okay, moving along to a fuel-injected car. Okay, moving along to a fuel-injected car. This is a 1987 Buick Regal Grand National Series car. And this car is fuel-injected, turbocharged, and intercooled. It's definitely different than the Z cars we just looked at because the Z cars have an inline 6 or straight 6. This is a V6, meaning at a V degree, there's 3 pistons on each side of the engine. It's a shorter engine and 3 pistons on each side, and a wider engine, but it's shorter, where the straight 6 is long and more narrow. Now I'm going to show you different things on this engine because on this engine there is no distributor. There's what's called a crank position sensor and a cam position sensor. These sensors control things on the engine. The crank position sensor is located near the crank pulley of the engine. Around this area here, there's a sensor that during the crankshaft's rotation, it senses the position and sends signals to decide which one of these coils fires. So the signal from the crank position sensor is a signal to these coils to spark these coils to spark the spark plugs of this engine. This is a 6 coil pack assembly, 6-cylinder coil pack, 1 for every cylinder. That's your ignition wires. Your spark plugs are down on the side of the V6, which are difficult to see, but you follow the wire, you'll find them way down there. This is the alternator on the accessories. Difficult to see on this engine because there's a lot of stuff here. This is your air cleaner. Mass airflow sensor. It senses the airflow and sends a signal to the computer to give you a symbol or a signal to feed into the fuel injectors. You got the cam position sensor, which is located down here, really hard to see, but it sends a signal to the computer which determines the firing order of these fuel injectors. Signals from the cam position sensor and signals from the mass airflow sensor, and all the sensors work together to determine how much fuel gets injected at one time to these injectors. Okay, we've also got the turbocharger right here. We've covered turbochargers before. This turbocharger has an external wastegate. No internal wastegate is built on this turbo. It's external. So whatever exhaust gases are not used to spin the turbo are bypassed in this external wastegate and gone to the downpipe and out the exhaust. This is an oxygen sensor. This is also one of the perimeters the computer reads to come up with a injection point to the engine. So it takes readings from exhaust temperature, mass airflow sensor, cam position sensor, air inlet sensor. All these figures are compounded together to decide how much fuel gets injected in that injector. It takes readings from all these different sensors to decide that. Now, you also have what's called a throttle position sensor right here. This is the throttle position sensor that when you have throttle angle, your accelerator gets pushed. See that little actuation right there on the throttle position sensor? As the position of the throttle increases, it also sends perimeters to the computer, the ECU. As this increases, fuel flow increases to the injectors. So this also is a perimeter the computer reads to send signals to the injectors to decide how much fuel goes in your injectors in your engine. So it takes a signal from the throttle position sensor, the mass airflow sensor, so it measures how much air I'm getting, how much throttle I'm getting, what signal I'm getting from the camshaft to determine the order of the firing of my injectors. So lots of little parameters in place. Now, this little guy right here is a boost sensing fuel pressure regulator. See this vacuum hose here? As the turbocharger makes boost, it sends pressurized boost to this as the boost increases, boost is pushed into this regulator, and the more boost that gets pushed in here, the more fuel pressure this fuel pressure regulator allows to the injectors. And what it does is, the more boost that gets pushed in here, it closes the return line. The more this gets pushed in, the more boost that gets pushed in, the more the fuel return line gets closed, so all the fuel pressure is getting dedicated to the injectors. Then when you lower boost again, or you're at idle, your fuel pressure is reduced, and your return line takes all the fuel that's not being used by the injectors, gets returned to the fuel tank by the return line that's on the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator. But this is a boost sensing fuel pressure regulator that works on boost. Cars without turbochargers have a fuel pressure regulator that's controlled by vacuum. As the engine makes vacuum, the fuel pressure increases in the fuel pressure regulator. And in another video, we showed you very good details on these 3.8 and 4.1 V6s. We showed you very good details on the components. But with this engine completely assembled, it looks entirely different. You cannot tell. It's very hard to see the individual components with all the accessories on the engine. Like I showed in that other video, you see basically a long block assembly. That's just the block and the heads of the engine. This is the entire engine assembly with all the accessories on, and it looks totally different than a long block, doesn't it? All right, I talked about a few cars. 2 of them were carbureted. One was an original carbureted 72 Datsun Nissan 240Z. The other was a carbureted blow-through setup that I made on a 79 Nissan Datsun 280ZX. And then I showed you my fuel-injected 1987 Buick Grand National. And you can see the differences and the similarities. There's some basics on identifying components under the hood of your car. And I hope you learned some things. And thank you for watching us. If you like us on Facebook, like us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and remember our budgetboosting.com website and our window stickers, which are coming soon to order on Buy It Now auctions on eBay. $20 free shipping. And remember, knowledge is power. It's horsepower. This is a forged racing piston made by HKS. 2.6 liters, 2,600 cc's. This is an L26 from 1974 Nissan Datsun 260Z connecting rod and piston assembly. 2.6 with a short stroke, 2.6 with a longer stroke. You can see the differences in piston sizes.